One Step Ahead by Lundquist and Beslick.
Morning. This is One Step Ahead Radio, and it's 13th of September, 2024. We are still on the planet Earth. It is a Friday the 13th, and the people will probably think about the significance of that day. However, we have a very interesting discussion today about Mario Draghi's new proposal to make Europe great again. And what is in that proposal, I will discuss that later on with James. James will join us and we will have a discussion. He had a proper look in what is going on in that proposal, as well as what are the implications for European strength going forward, as well as what challenges that poses to a further development of European Union and its capacity. But before that, there are some other news, some good news, and unfortunately, some of these good news are always coming out of China. And the Chinese news are interesting from a perspective of energy investments. So China, or Chinese company, Envision Energy Company, plans to develop a 1 billion green hydrogen industry park in Spain to help the European nation reach its greenhouse gas reduction goals. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez is currently visiting China and is expected to sign a memorandum of understanding regarding the park. Envision said in a statement that has been published. The park will produce electrolyzers, machines that strip hydrogen from water using electricity, and would be powered by locally produced solar, wind, and biomass energy, according to people familiar with the deal, who asked not to be identified because the plan hadn't been formally announced. This is very interesting from European development perspective, not at least because we will discuss the Draghi, sort of a Mario Draghi's proposal going forward. And you can clearly see that the China is trying to make strategic investments in Europe and become a renewable energy partner, while we, on the other hand, have a fossil energy partner in the US exporting a lot of gas or LNG to Europe, and will increase that going forward. Now, before we go into discussion on the gas versus renewable energy, it's interesting to note that there has been a new report published by Earth Commission saying that basically the hope for sustainable lifestyle needs a radical transformation of global politics and a fair distribution of resources. What it also says is that all of humanity could share a prosperous, equitable future, but the space for development is rapidly shrinking under pressure from a wealthy minority of ultra consumers. This is a groundbreaking study which is sort of a pointing at something that many of us already know, that something that is related to our lifestyle, the consumerism in the shape and form we have it today, is posing a significant threat to the planetary boundaries across the world. Now, the scale of this change will alarm many governments in this report. The paper is 62-page thought experiment by international team of 65 natural and social scientists that seek to map out how the world's 7.5 billion people could remain within a safe planetary boundaries while accessing necessary levels of food, water, energy, shelter, and transport. And it then projects how this may change by 2050, when the population is likely to be 9.7 billion people on this planet. The interesting things in terms of the development related to this across the world, you will think that this report and many other reports will indicate that industries are shifting the gears, and financial industry, one of them, is one that is not really doing what it said it will, and Wall Street is quietly turning the tail on its sustainability commitment. That has been going on for some time, and it's continuing. And this is quite a significant problem because, as you probably know, the capital allocation capacity of the United States is so huge that it actually means a lot in terms of how companies respond. I've mentioned this before earlier on the One Step Ahead radio, that we have a number of proposals for the AGMs across the world that this year and the previous year have less and less ESG related proposals. And I think the most of the cuts on the focus on these proposals, as you probably know, AGMs are in this context very important, indicate the importance of the topic for the boards, but also operational capacity of the companies to transform. these things are really bad from that perspective. And while we, on the one hand, have Wall Street banks basically turning the tail, we have, on the other hand, a lot of Chinese investments, especially in this space of European Union, but also other spaces around the world, which may cause a discussion on this Mario Draghi thing. So, with that, I would like to welcome in the One Step Ahead Radio James to join us. And James, I saw this Mario Draghi paper, and I spent some time reading this, and I was quite puzzled with the way how he expressed himself. I mean, if you look for the climate change, it's actually almost not mentioned. He's sort of taking another angle on that. Could you enlighten us a bit about what you think the Draghi is trying to tell us?
Yeah, good morning, Sasha. Good morning, everybody. Good to be here again. Yeah, I did the same thing. I did the check, sort of how many times the document mentions the word climate, the phrase climate change, because it's kind of your instinct to do it, when there's this whole thing about decarbonization. I think it's very interesting. Initially when you hear the top level kind of media reports and things that came out immediately, there was this kind of very binary, is it pro growth or is it pro green kind of
Yeah.
dichotomy? And everything has to be black and white. And now with a new kind of political wind going through Brussels, it's kind of, well, the Green Deal is being, sort of rowed back on. But then when you actually get into the detail of the document and you actually go, it's obviously very, very detailed and very analytical. He comes at the whole, there's a whole chapter on decarbonization and competitiveness. And it seems, and there's a lot of very positive discussion around the importance of the energy transition. His report was, welcomed by renewable energy groups in Brussels, so representing the wind and the solar industry for some of the policy recommendations that he makes. But it's kind of like he never sort of says that it needs to be done because there's climate change. It needs to be done because then European business can be more competitive. It seemed to be that the kind of the premise behind everything.
But is this, James, is this a rise of the new narrative? Because, I mean, previously the European governments or European Union has been championing, climate action to tackle these big challenges that will face industries and countries. Now it seems to be that the gears are shifting towards a narrative where the adaptation to climate change through the industrial transformation is something that is sort of going to take over the pure, I would say, climate alarmist sort of a discussion.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I mean, obviously, if you ask someone like Mario Draghi to do a report on EU competitiveness, you're going to get a certain set of answers. And I think he's very canny, very smart, politically, diplomatically. The report is very careful not to really take sides on the big issues, and he kind of lays it down for the policymakers and says, you can't have your cake and eat it. You can't have everything that Europe, aspires to be, which, I had this phrase, you can't be a leader in new technologies, a beacon of climate responsibility, and an independent player on the world stage. You have to you have to sort of be more proactive and decide what you want. And what he says is you need an industrial strategy. You need an EU-wide industrial strategy, and climate decarbonization has to be a cornerstone of that in order to get electricity prices down, for example, to get natural gas out of price setting electricity prices. There's a lot of very reasonable thinking underneath that for what it means. I'd know from your perspective in terms of investors how they're going to be looking at what this implication might mean. Everyone thinks the energy transition narrative is something that's going to go on sort of taken for granted, but how's that going to be viewed?
Look, the report comes in a very interesting point in European sort of a union's history, or even in a current sort of a state of European Union, where the push, or competence, I would almost say, squeeze between the US and China is making European Union quite stressed. And I think the reason why this is done is also to re-emphasize, what capacity and also what challenges, because he's addressing a lot of challenges. Do you see, previously Europe talked about other things. Now he talks a lot about productivity. What is your take on that? Is that pointing also on all the weaknesses we have in European Union with the difficulties to align across different countries? We still don't have a quite well functioning markets within the European Union. What's your take on that?
Well, it's kind of it's something that always gets said about the European Union and why it's dysfunctional and why it doesn't manage to reach its full potential. Because it's fragmented, because it's got arcane and sometimes Byzantine decision-making processes. Everyone has to be in agreement. This whole sort of majority voting. And so, that finger gets pointed, and it's always very reasonable, and everyone thinks, well, of course, Europe should be more cohesive and have a coordinated industrial strategy and review the internal market and so on. But then, we always get back to the same old discussion of all the countries sitting around the table, and everybody, wants their self-interests. And I don't think, that the new European Commission is going to be particularly different on that front. So it's going to be interesting in terms of the political reaction specifically. But I think everyone, sort of was one of these reports that can justify everyone can justify sort of their point of view and their particular take. Say, well, Draghi said it. Well, in that case, I'm going to propose this. And you can see it from everyone can see it from, because it's so neutral and so sort of careful. Say everyone can pick a little piece out of it and say, well, in the Draghi report it said, and so therefore I'm justified.
But do you see, I mean, from your vantage point and the context that you have interactions with the companies, do you see this sort of a shift in terms of the narrative? Is that sort of the next thing, that companies will try to use competitiveness as the key sort of a argument for all the efforts they're making in a decarbonization space? Or because we are sort of a shifting from the moral high ground to something that is a necessity for business to survive over time?
Yeah, absolutely. That's really a very central takeaway for me in the way it gets framed, and what I said at the beginning in terms of the overall narrative, that European leadership in climate gets questioned. Sort of simple things that are saying, oh, we need to have more stakeholder engagement around these issues, which is kind of can be interpreted as a way of saying, well, we need to sort of be less ideological about climate change generally, and be push back those boundaries, push back sort of the question of phasing out internal combustion engines or phasing in heat pumps and all those kind of delicate decisions. And that companies can sort of say, well, we need to balance. It's all this question of balance. Industrial activity, competitiveness, jobs, and the people. There's quite a set of lobbies out there that kind of will leverage that, and companies that sort of don't want to be too ambitious. And we've seen a lot of companies recently pushing back on their on their targets, and it's as I said, it can be another excuse to say, well, politically we're rethinking, and we need to sort of have a more reasonable and pragmatic approach to the transition into sustainability. So it's all kind of it helps, as you say, that kind of top line narrative that's kind of the winds are changing.
It's also interesting that, of course, the narrative may change or is changing, and it's obvious even in the European Union. However, the underlying challenges are pretty much the same. The way to approach them may differ, but the challenges are still there. And I think thanks James for joining us and giving us your insights. I hope that all of you listening will be also able very soon to have access to these sessions as well. As a podcast. We are working on that. It's going to be ready soon, and we will inform everybody about that, so you can share it and view it afterwards and listen to it. Some of these pieces are really, really interesting, and I think many people would probably like to hear more about that. James, thanks a lot.
Thanks,
we move on, and we move on to other things that are happening in the world. Los Angeles was hit by double whammy on wildfires and earthquake. Residents rattled by 4.7 magnitude quake, while firefighters working very hard to put the blaze east of the city. This is related, of course, to the underlying warming across the planet that many people are still not taking too seriously. And related to that, entire Earth vibrated for 9 days after the climate triggered mega tsunami, and I had experience of that when I was in Japan. Landslide in Greenland caused unprecedented seismic event that shows impact of global heating, scientists have pointed out. This will be all for this week and this session on One Step Ahead Radio. Thank you very much for listening. I welcome you to join us next week. We will continue bringing to you news across the world in this space and discuss topics that are relevant not only from sustainability point of view, but also from business and also political side of developments across the world. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.